The stars looked different that morning. Captain Hyo-jin stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Station and watched something huge drop out of space near the moon. The alien ship was massive, all clean lines and perfect angles. It looked like someone had built a government building in space and decided to make it fly. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Lieutenant Bo-ram from her console. Her voice was steady, but Hyo-jin could see her hands shaking a little. This was humanity's first contact with aliens, and nobody knew what to expect. "Put it through," Hyo-jin ordered. The main screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. It looked like someone had mixed a lizard with a filing cabinet. The creature had gray skin, tiny black eyes, and wore what looked like the most boring uniform in the universe. "Greetings, primitive species of the third planet," the alien said in perfect English. Its voice sounded like a computer reading tax forms. "I am Administrative Director Cleth Prime of the Valdrian Galactic Empire. We have come to accept your surrender." Hyo-jin blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your surrender," Cleth Prime repeated, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "We are transmitting the proper documentation now. Please review Forms Val 1 through VAL 47,000 and submit your compliance within 72 standard hours." The communication system started beeping like crazy as thousands of documents flooded in. Lieutenant Bo-ram stared at her screen in shock. "Sir, they just sent us 47,000 pages of paperwork." "Paperwork?" Hyo-jin asked. "It looks like surrender forms, sir. They want us to fill out forms to surrender." Hyo-jin felt something strange building in his chest. It took him a moment to realize it was laughter. "They want us to file paperwork to give up?" Admiral Tae-ho's voice crackled over the comm from Earth. The old soldier had been watching the entire exchange from his command center. "Captain, patch me through to our new friends." The alien's face appeared again. Cleth Prime looked annoyed that the humans were taking so long to start filling out forms. "Administrative Director," Tae-ho said, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in Earth's military. "I'm Admiral Tae-ho, Commanding Officer of Earth's Defense Forces. I've looked at your paperwork." "Excellent," Cleth Prime said, brightening. "We find that most species require only minimal review time before accepting the efficiency of our administrative processes." "About that," Tae-ho continued, "I noticed that Form VAL 2847C requires us to get permission before building anything taller than 2.3 meters. That includes my grandson's treehouse." "Correct. All construction must be approved by the Regional Administrative Council for Structural Compliance." There was a long pause. Then Tae-ho started laughing. It was a deep, rolling laugh that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and dangerous. Soon, everyone on the bridge was laughing too. "Did I say something amusing?" Cleth Prime asked, confused. "You want my grandson to file paperwork in triplicate to build a treehouse," Tae-ho said, wiping tears from his eyes. "That's the funniest thing I've heard in decades." Dr. So Young, Earth's best alien language expert, had been studying the Valdrian. Transmissions from her lab on the station. She hurried onto the bridge carrying a tablet full of analysis. "Captain," she said quietly, "I've been studying their language patterns and historical data they included in the files. These Valdrians have conquered 17 star systems, but not through warfare. They do it through paperwork. They make surrender so complicated that civilizations give up rather than deal with the bureaucracy." Hyo-jin stared at her. "They conquer people with forms?" "It gets worse. Look at this." So Young showed him the tablet. Form VAL 8834J requires approval to operate any vehicle faster than walking speed. Form VAL 121456B requires a permit to gather more than 3 people in one place. Form VAL 20,000A requires written authorization to express disagreement with imperial policy. "They want to make thinking illegal," Hyo-jin said. "Not illegal," So Young corrected. "Just really, really inconvenient." Back on the main screen, Cleth Prime was still waiting for humanity's response. The alien had pulled out what looked like a clipboard and was taking notes. "We understand this is a significant transition," Cleth Prime said. "Our records indicate that primitive species often require assistance understanding the proper procedures. We have prepared a helpful orientation package with only 12,000 additional forms to help you begin the integration process." Admiral Tejo's voice came back over the comm. "Director Cleth Prime, I have Earth's official response ready." "Excellent. Please transmit your completed surrender documentation." "It's not exactly a surrender," Tejo said. "More of a counteroffer." The alien looked pleased. "Ah, you wish to negotiate the terms of your submission. Very well. Please submit Form Val 9876-C for request to modify surrender conditions, along with supporting documentation as outlined in Appendix 47B. "No need for forms," Tejo said cheerfully. "Our response is simple." A new document appeared on the Valdrian ship's screens. It was a single page, written in thick red crayon in a child's handwriting. At the top it said, "Earth's Answer," in crooked letters. Below that, in slightly neater adult writing, was a message signed by every world leader. "Dear Valdrian Empire, we got your paperwork. We used it to line our bird cages. If you want Earth, come and take it. P.S. My grandson says your forms are stupid. Admiral Tejo and everyone else on Earth." Cleth Prime stared at the message for a full minute. The alien's eye twitched. "This is not in proper format. There are no case numbers, no reference codes, no administrative tracking headers. How are we supposed to file this in our response database?" "You're not," Hyojin said, grinning. "That's the point." But how do we process a response that doesn't follow proper documentation standards?" "Sounds like your problem, not ours," Tejo's voice came through the speakers. The bridge crew was trying not to laugh as Cleth Prime frantically shuffled through his papers, looking for a form that would tell him how to handle humans who refused. "To follow proper procedure, this is highly irregular," the alien muttered. "Most irregular. I'll need to consult with my supervisors about how to proceed when a species rejects proper administrative protocols." "You do that," Tejo said. "We'll be here when you figure out what to do next." The transmission ended, leaving the alien ship, floating silently near the moon. Hyojin looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were good people, Earth people, who had just been told they needed permission from aliens to live their lives. The laughter was gone now, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Sir," Lieutenant Boram said quietly, "what do you think they'll do next?" Hyojin thought about his own children back on Earth, playing in parks that would require permits, under Valdrian law. He thought about his wife, who would need approval to teach her students. He thought about everything that made humans human, and how it would all disappear under a mountain of forms and regulations. "I think," he said slowly, "they're about to learn why it's a bad idea to try to cage warriors with paperwork." Sub-Administrator Cleth Prime stared at the human response document for the third hour straight. The red crayon marks seemed to mock everything he believed about proper civilization. In all his years of administrative service, spanning the conquest of 17 different worlds, he had never encountered such blatant disregard for correct procedures. "Computer," he said to his ship's artificial intelligence, "analyze the human response document for compliance with standard submission protocols." "Analysis complete," the computer replied in a voice as boring as Cleth Prime's own. "Document shows zero compliance with acceptable formats. No proper headers, incorrect writing implements used, missing reference numbers, improper signatures, and contains what appears to be deliberately insulting language." Cleth Prime's gray skin turned slightly green. "How is this possible? The preliminary scans showed humans have developed writing systems, mathematical concepts, and basic organizational structures. They should understand the importance of proper documentation." "Perhaps," suggested his aide, a younger Valdrian named Bleck 7. "They simply need more time to review our requirements." 17,000 pages can be overwhelming for primitive minds? 47,000 pages, Cleth Prime corrected automatically. And they are not that primitive. Our scanners detected advanced technology, space travel capabilities, and complex social structures. They should be capable of basic form completion. Meanwhile, 60,000 kilometers away, Captain Minho was having the time of his life. The pilot of Earth's newest stealth ship, the Soul's Fury, was conducting what Admiral Tae-ho had officially called reconnaissance, but what Minho privately thought of as, let's see what these pencil pushers are really made of. The Soul's Fury was small, fast, and completely invisible to Valdrian sensors. Minho had spent the last 6 hours flying circles around their massive ship, taking pictures, recording transmissions, and generally being as annoying as possible, without actually shooting anyone. "This is incredible," he said to his co-pilot, Lieutenant Sang-woo. "Look at their ship design. Everything is perfectly symmetrical, every surface is exactly the same shade of gray, and I swear they have filing cabinets built into the hull." "Are those really filing cabinets?" Sang-woo asked, studying the scanner readings. "External storage modules for hard copy documentation," Minho read from the translation software. "So yes, they literally built filing cabinets into their spaceship." The two men looked at each other and burst out laughing. "Wait," Sang-woo said, "it gets better. Check out their weapon systems." Minho looked at the scanner data and his laughter died. Oh no. What is it? They have incredibly powerful weapons. Energy cannons that could crack a moon, shield generators that could stop a nuclear blast, engines that could outrun anything we have. Minho paused. "But look at how they're organized." Sang-woo studied the data. "Each weapon system requires authorization codes from 3 different departments before it can fire, and their engine systems need approval from a safety review board before they can exceed certain speeds, and their shields won't activate without a properly filed environmental impact assessment." They stared at the readings in silence for a moment. "They could destroy us," Minho said finally, "but they'd need to fill out paperwork first." Back on Earth, General Woo Jin was reading the Valdrian documents with the kind of professional interest a soldier develops for enemy intelligence. As Earth's top military strategist, he had seen every kind of warfare humans had invented. This was something completely new. "Colonel Da-eun," he called to his aide. "Come look at this!" Colonel Da-eun hurried over, carrying her own stack of printed alien forms. "Sir, I've been analyzing their administrative structure. It's fascinating and terrifying at the same time." "Show me what you found." Da-eun spread several documents across the general's desk. "They have forms for everything. Form VL 4455 requires permission to change your sleep schedule. Form VL 7823 requires approval to modify your diet. Form VL 9912 requires authorization to have an opinion different from your assigned social group." They control their own people through paperwork, Woo Jin realized. "It's more than that, sir. They've created a system where nobody can do anything without permission from someone else, and that someone else needs permission from another person. It goes up and up until you need approval from committees that take months to make decisions." General Woo Jin had fought in 3 wars and countless smaller conflicts. He understood strategy, tactics, and the psychology of combat. What the Valdrians had created was something else entirely. A weapon that destroyed the will to fight, without firing a shot. "Colonel, I want you to start Operation Paperwork immediately." "Sir, if they want to play bureaucracy games, we'll show them how humans handle red tape. Get me our best hackers, our most creative writers, and anyone who's ever worked in government administration. We're going to flood their systems with so much paperwork they'll forget why they came here." 3 hours later, the Valdrian ship began receiving humanity's counter-bureaucratic assault. It started with simple requests. Earth wanted to file a complaint about the invasion using Form VL 3344B for reporting hostile activities. Of course, Form VAL 3344B required supporting documentation, which Earth was happy to provide. thousands of supporting documents. Lieutenant Kyung-soo, Earth's most notorious test pilot, submitted a flight plan for his next training mission. The plan was written entirely in ancient Korean poetry, referenced 17 different forms that didn't exist, and requested permission to fly backwards through time. When the Valdrians rejected it, he filed an appeal using Form VL 8899C for appealing. Administrative decisions. Then he launched anyway. Valdrian vessel, Kyung-soo broadcast as he flew loops around their ship. This is Earth pilot Kyung-soo requesting immediate clarification on your rejection of my poetic flight plan. I notice you failed to provide proper justification as required by subsection 43J of your own administrative code, Val Alpha 7. Cleth Prime was beginning to develop what humans would call a headache. Human pilot, you did not receive approval for your flight plan. Actually, Kyung-soo replied cheerfully, I'm operating under Emergency Protocol Earth 1, which allows immediate launch in case of pending bureaucratic delays. I've filed the proper notifications in triplicate. We have no record of receiving any. Check your form Val 5566K inbox. I submitted them using the express processing fee structure outlined in Amendment 44B of your fee schedule. There was a long pause while Cleth Prime frantically searched through his files. Dr. So-young was monitoring the exchange from Earth with growing amusement. The Valdrians had spent centuries perfecting their administrative control system, but they had never faced an opponent who used their own rules against them. Admiral, she reported to Taeho, the Valdrians are starting to show signs of systemic stress. Their response times are increasing, their communications are becoming more erratic, and they've started requesting clarification on their own procedures. How long before they break? Hard to say, sir. Their entire culture is based on following rules, but we're forcing them to follow so many contradictory rules at once that their decision-making process is grinding to a halt. Admiral Taeho smiled grimly. Good. Let them choke on their own red tape. Back on the Valdrian ship, Cleth Prime was discovering that conquering Earth was going to be much more complicated than conquering other worlds. The humans weren't fighting, back in any way he understood. But they weren't surrendering either. Instead, they were doing something that made no sense. They were treating the invasion like a game. Sub-administrator, Black 7 reported nervously. The humans have submitted 3,847 new documents in the last hour. Most of them appear to be requests for clarification on previously submitted requests for clarification. Process them according to standard procedures, Cleth Prime ordered. Sir, if we process them according to standard procedures, it will take approximately 14 years. Cleth Prime felt something his species had no name for, the desire to ignore proper procedures and just shoot something. It was a very human feeling, and it scared him more than he cared to admit. Sir, Black 7 continued, I have a suggestion. Perhaps we should proceed to Phase 2 of the subjugation protocol. Phase 2? Cleth Prime considered this. Phase 2 involved economic sanctions and military pressure. It required much less paperwork than the administrative approach. Yes, prepare for Phase 2 implementation. As the Valdrian ship began powering up its more aggressive systems, Captain Hyojin watched from the Earth Defense Station with satisfaction. They're getting frustrated, he reported to Admiral Taeho. Whatever they're planning next, they're abandoning their precious procedures to do it. Good, Taeho replied. Once they abandon their bureaucracy, they'll have to fight us like soldiers. And soldiers, Captain, are something we understand very well indeed. The Valdrian compliance fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a gray metal thunderstorm. 50 ships, each one perfectly identical, arranged in a formation so precise it looked like someone had used a ruler to place them. Sub-administrator Cleth Prime stood on the bridge of his flagship, feeling confident for the first time since arriving at Earth. Attention, primitive humans, he broadcast on all frequencies. You now face the full administrative power of the Valdrian Empire. Surrender immediately, or face the consequences of resisting proper galactic order. Fleet Admiral Jiwoo watched, the alien armada from her command ship, the Inchen's pride, and felt something her grandfather would have recognized. It was the same feeling Korean warriors had felt for thousands of years when facing overwhelming odds, a mixture of fear, excitement, and stubborn refusal to back down. "All ships," she commanded. "This is Admiral Jiwoo. Today we face an enemy that thinks they can force us to live in filing cabinets. They think they can make us ask permission to be human. I say we show them what happens when you try to put chains on warriors." The human fleet was smaller, older, and mostly made up of ships that had never been designed for war. Mining vessels, research ships, cargo haulers, and a few actual military craft that Earth had managed to build in the weeks since first contact. Against the Valdrian fleet, they looked like toys. Commander In-ho, captain of the destroyer Busan's Hammer, looked at his bridge crew and grinned. "Well, boys and girls, we're about to make history, either as heroes who saved Earth, or as the idiots who tried to ram a battleship with a mining platform." His crew grinned back. They knew which one they preferred. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Do-hyun from the sensor station, "the Valdrian ships are maintaining perfect formation. They're not even trying to spread out or take defensive positions." "Of course they're not," In-ho said. "Spreading out would require filing a formation change request with their Fleet Coordination Committee. Probably takes 3 hours to approve." Dr. Yunji, Earth's best military psychologist, was studying the Valdrian fleet patterns from her station on the Incheon's Pride. After weeks of analyzing alien communications and behavior, she was beginning to understand how their minds worked. "Admiral," she reported to Jiwoo, "I think I know their weakness. They can't handle situations that don't follow their predetermined patterns. Every action they take has to fit into their procedural framework." Meaning? Meaning if we do things they haven't planned for, their decision-making process breaks down. They literally don't know how to respond to actions that aren't in their manual. Admiral Jiwoo smiled. "Then let's give them something that's definitely not in any manual." The battle began when Commander In-ho did something that violated every rule of space combat ever written. Instead of maintaining a safe distance and trading long-range fire, he aimed the Busan's Hammer directly at the Valdrian flagship and hit the acceleration controls. "Ramming speed!" he shouted, broadcasting ancient Korean war songs at maximum volume. "If we're going down, we're taking them with us!" The Valdrian crew watched in horror as the human ship charged straight at them. Cleth Prime frantically searched through his combat procedures manual, looking for the section on ramming attacks. "Computer, display Defensive Protocol 47A for ramming attack response," he ordered. "Defensive Protocol 47A does not exist," the computer replied. "Ramming attacks are classified as irrational combat behavior and are not covered by standard defensive procedures." "Then what do we do?" "Please consult your regional combat administrator for clarification on handling irrational enemy actions." "We don't have time for that!" Cleth Prime screamed, which was probably the first time in Valdrian history that an officer had complained about following proper procedures. At the last second, In-ho pulled up and scraped along the Valdrian ship's hull, his mining lasers cutting deep gouges in their perfect gray armor. The alien ship's shields flickered and died, not from damage, but because the shield generators required approval from the safety committee before engaging in close-quarters combat. "This is Commander In-ho to all Earth forces," he broadcast, laughing like a maniac. "The aliens can't handle it when we don't fight fair. Their computers don't know what to do." Marine Sergeant Young-soo was already putting that information to use. His transport ship had docked with a Valdrian cruiser using nothing but magnetic clamps and determination. The alien docking procedures required a 47-step authentication process before allowing any ship to connect. Young-soo had skipped all 47 steps. "Security alert," the Valdrian ship's computer announced as Young-soo and his Marines came aboard. "Unauthorized personnel detected. Please report to Administrative Processing Station 7 for proper visitor registration." Young Su's Marines looked at each other and started laughing. They were conducting a military boarding action, and the alien computer was asking them to check in at the visitor's desk. "Sorry, computer," Young Su called out. "We're here on official Earth Marine business. We don't need to fill out any forms." The Valdrian crew they encountered simply stood there, confused. Their training manual had no procedures for dealing with intruders who refused to follow proper registration protocols. Some of them actually tried to hand the Marines visitor badges. Captain Hyojin watched the battle from his defense station and felt something his ancestors would have understood perfectly. This wasn't just a fight for territory or resources. This was a battle between two completely different ways of thinking about life itself. "Sir," Lieutenant Boram reported, "the Valdrian fleet is requesting a temporary ceasefire to conduct an administrative review of human combat tactics." "Are they serious?" "Completely serious, sir. They want to file a formal complaint about our improper warfare procedures with the Galactic Combat Regulation Authority." Hyojin keyed his microphone to broadcast to both fleets. "Attention, Valdrian forces. This is Captain Hyojin of Earth Defense Command. We have reviewed your request for a timeout to complain about our fighting style." There was a pause, as every ship in both fleets waited for Earth's response. "Our answer is no," Hyojin continued. "We don't fight according to your rules because we're not your subjects. We're warriors, and warriors make their own rules." The battle intensified as more human ships followed In-Ho's example. Captain Min-Ho arrived with the Soul's Fury and began attacking Valdrian ships by hiding inside space debris and popping out to take quick shots before disappearing again. The Valdrian targeting computers couldn't track him because stealth attacks weren't listed in their approved combat scenarios. Lieutenant Commander Sang-Mi turned her agricultural transport into an improvised bomber by filling it with fertilizer and scrap metal, then ramming it into the middle of the Valdrian formation. The explosion shouldn't have done much damage to their advanced ships, but their computers crashed trying to classify what kind of weapon had just hit them. Admiral Jiwoo watched the chaos with professional satisfaction. "Dr. Yunji, what's the status of their fleet coordination?" "Breaking down completely, sir. They're flooding their own communications channels with requests for guidance on how to handle human tactics. Their admirals are arguing with their bureaucrats about whether our actions violate galactic law." "Good. Signal all ships. Operation Slapstick is now in effect." Operation Slapstick was Admiral Tae-ho's masterpiece of military planning. It looked completely random and chaotic, but it was actually a carefully coordinated attack designed to hit the Valdrians in every way they couldn't handle. Human ships would appear to retreat, then attack from unexpected angles. They would break formation, regroup, split up again, and generally behave like a military force that had never heard of proper tactics. The Valdrians, whose entire battle strategy was based on predicting enemy movements, found themselves facing an opponent that seemed to make decisions by throwing dice. "Fleet Admiral Cleth Prime," came a transmission from one of the Valdrian cruisers. "We require immediate guidance. The human ships are moving in patterns that don't match any known military doctrine." "Improvise," Cleth Prime ordered, then immediately regretted it. Improvisation wasn't something Valdrians did. "Sir, improvise is not a recognized tactical command. Please provide specific procedural guidance." Cleth Prime looked around his bridge at his crew, who were all staring at him expectantly. These were beings who had been trained from birth to follow orders, follow procedures, and never, ever make decisions without proper authorization. And now they were facing humans who seemed to specialize in making decisions that made no sense to anyone but themselves. "Admiral," came another transmission, this time from Captain Hyojin. "I believe you're starting to understand our position. You came here with filing cabinets and flowcharts to conquer warriors. We find this—" Hyojin paused, and Cleth Prime could hear the smile in his voice. Amusing. For the first time in his life, Sub-Administrator Cleth Prime began to wonder. If there might be situations where proper procedures weren't enough, it was a dangerous thought for a Valdrian to have, and it was exactly what the humans had been counting on. Marshal J. Ho stood in Earth's war room, looking at tactical displays that showed something unprecedented in military history. The human fleet wasn't just fighting the Valdrians, they were confusing them to death. "Report," he ordered Colonel Bin Wu, Earth's ground force commander. "Sir, the Valdrians have landed troops on Earth in 3 locations, Australia, Brazil, and Norway, but they're not fighting the way we expected." Bin Wu pulled up footage from the Australian landing site. Valdrian soldiers had established a perfectly organized base camp with geometric precision. Every tent was exactly the same distance apart. Every supply stack was precisely measured, and every soldier stood at exact attention. "They've been there for 6 hours," Bin Wu continued, "but they haven't moved beyond their landing zone. Our scouts report they're waiting for approval from their headquarters to begin ground operations." "Approval for what?" "Everything, sir. They need authorization to leave their designated landing area, permission to engage local forces, and approval to consume their field rations." Marshal J. Ho shook his head in amazement. "What about our forces?" "That's where it gets interesting. Our troops are treating this like a training exercise in unconventional warfare." The 3rd Infantry Regiment surrounded the Valdrian camp in Australia and started playing K-pop music at maximum volume. The aliens filed a noise complaint. A noise complaint? In the middle of an invasion? They submitted Form Val 8834C for reporting. Excessive audio disturbance during military operations. Captain Park responded by filing a counter-complaint about their ships blocking the view of the stars. Meanwhile, in space, Lieutenant Commander Sang Mi was about to make military history. She had convinced her crew to help her turn an old cargo hauler into the strangest stealth bomber ever built. "Ma'am," said Corpsman Li Jin, "are you sure this will work?" Sang Mi looked at their creation with pride. They had covered the cargo ship with space junk, making it look like a floating asteroid. Inside, they had packed it with every piece of obsolete military equipment Earth could spare. Old missile warheads, broken laser cannons, and enough explosive material to crack a small moon. "The Valdrians scan for known ship configurations," Sang Mi explained. "Their computers are programmed to identify threats based on established patterns. This doesn't match any pattern in their database." She was right. When their disguised bomber drifted into the Valdrian formation, the alien sensors detected a small asteroid that posed no threat. Their computer systems, designed to be perfectly efficient, ignored it completely. Sang Mi waited until she was in the exact center of the enemy fleet before triggering the explosive. The blast tore through 3 Valdrian ships and severely damaged 4 others. But the real damage was to their computers. "Error," announced the Valdrian fleet's main computer system. "Unknown weapon detected. Classification: impossible. Please consult Technical Manual 47B for guidance on impossible weapons. Technical Manual 47B does not contain information on impossible weapons," reported the ship's librarian system. "Then how do we defend against them?" asked the tactical computer. "Please submit Form VAL 99Z for research request on unknown threat classification." While the Valdrian computers argued with each other, Colonel Bin Wu was discovering that ground combat with aliens was nothing like he had expected. The Valdrian soldiers were individually stronger, faster, and better equipped than humans. Their weapons could cut through tank armor. Their shields could stop artillery shells, and their armor made them nearly invulnerable, but they couldn't adapt. "Watch this," Sergeant Day Wan told his squad as they approached the Valdrian camp in Brazil. "I'm going to defeat that entire platoon without firing a shot." Day Wan walked up to the Valdrian perimeter and knocked on their command post like he was visiting a neighbor. "Excuse me," he said politely to the alien guard. "I'm Sergeant Day Wan from Earth's 7th Infantry Division. I need to speak with your commanding officer about filing a complaint." The Valdrian guard stared at him. You wish to surrender? Oh no, I want to file a complaint. You landed in a protected wildlife preserve without proper environmental permits. That's a violation of Earth Environmental Code 23J. I must consult with my superior officer, the guard said, clearly confused. 20 minutes later, the entire Valdrian base was in chaos as their officers tried to figure out how to handle an enemy soldier filing environmental complaints about their invasion. Half of them wanted to shoot Day One, but the other half insisted they needed to follow proper legal procedures first. Intelligence Officer Moon Young was having the time of her life intercepting Valdrian communications. The aliens were so frustrated they had started requesting emergency bureaucratic support from their home world. "Admiral," she reported to Fleet Admiral Ji-woo, "the Valdrians just sent a priority message to their capital requesting immediate deployment of administrative combat specialists." Administrative combat specialists? Military bureaucrats, sir. They're asking for officers trained in fighting enemies who don't follow proper procedures. Ji-woo laughed so hard she nearly fell out of her command chair. They're calling for backup bureaucrats? It gets better. Their home world responded by asking them to fill out Form VL 12000A for emergency administrative support request, which requires a detailed explanation of why their standard procedures failed. How long will that take them? Based on the form requirements, approximately 6 weeks if they work around the clock. The space battle had evolved into something. That would have been comedy if it wasn't so deadly. Human ships were using tactics that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Captain Minho had started attacking Valdrian vessels by pretending to be a lost tourist, asking for directions, and then shooting them while they tried to figure out how to file his request with their tourism information department. Commander. Inho had discovered that Valdrian ships couldn't fire their weapons if their target was broadcasting music because their computer systems classified it as a cultural exchange rather than combat. He was currently attacking a battlecruiser while playing ancient Korean war drums at maximum volume. This is insane, Cleth Prime muttered from his flagship bridge. They're not following any logical combat patterns. How are we supposed to fight? An enemy that attacks while playing music and files environmental complaints during an invasion? His aide, Bleck 7, looked up from a stack of forms. Sir, I believe I have identified the problem. Humans appear to treat warfare as a creative exercise rather than a procedural requirement. What does that mean? They make up new tactics during battle instead of following established military doctrine. Our computer systems can't predict their actions because they don't follow predictable patterns. Cleth Prime felt something his species had no word for. The desire to throw all the rulebooks out the nearest airlock and just start shooting everything that moved. It was a very human emotion, which made it even more disturbing. Dr. Yoon-ji was monitoring the psychological effects of the battle on both sides. The humans were adapting and improvising faster than ever before, while the Valdrians were showing signs of systematic breakdown. Admiral, she reported to Ji-woo, the Valdrian command structure is developing what we might call institutional paralysis. They're so afraid of making the wrong decision that they're not making any decisions at all. What happens when a civilization like that finally breaks? Unknown, sir. They've never faced a situation like this before. Their entire culture is based on having a procedure for everything. We're forcing them to improvise, which is something they're not mentally equipped to handle. The turning point came when Marshal J-Ho authorized Operation Nonsense, a coordinated attack that violated every principle of military strategy ever written. Human forces would retreat when they should advance, attack when they should defend, and generally behave like they had never heard of military tactics. The Valdrians, whose battle computers were designed to predict enemy actions based on logical strategy, found themselves facing opponents who seemed to roll dice to make decisions. Fleet Admiral Cleth Prime, came a desperate transmission from one of his cruiser captains. The humans just surrounded our ship with cargo vessels and started broadcasting cooking shows. Our targeting computers can't lock onto vessels engaged. In food preparation. What are our orders? Cleth Prime stared at the tactical display, watching human cargo ships circle his warships while broadcasting recipes for kimchi. His computer systems were flashing error messages, his officers were requesting clarification on procedures that didn't exist, and his carefully organized fleet was falling apart under attack by enemies who treated war like an art project. "Sir?" Black 7 asked quietly. "Your orders?" For the first time in his life, Sub-Administrator Cleth Prime had no idea what form to fill out. The humans had dragged him into a situation where proper procedures simply didn't exist, and that, he was beginning to realize, had been their plan all along. The Valdrian administrative dreadnought Perfect Compliance dropped out of hyperspace like a gray metal mountain. It was 5 times larger than any ship in the human fleet, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shield generators that could stop a star's worth of energy. But more importantly, it carried the most advanced bureaucratic computer system ever built. Sub-Administrator Cleth Prime watched its arrival with something approaching relief. Finally, the Empire had sent something that could handle humans and their chaotic approach to warfare. "Attention, human forces," came a transmission from the massive ship. "This is Administrative Director Vex Prime of the Valdrian Empire's Ultimate Compliance Division. You have violated 4,147 different galactic regulations regarding proper conduct during subjugation proceedings. Surrender immediately or face maximum administrative action." Admiral Tejo responded from Earth with characteristic directness. "This is Admiral Tejo. We've got your bureaucratic Death Star on our screens. Very impressive. Our response is the same as before. Come and take what you can." The Perfect Compliance began its attack by broadcasting surrender forms in 40,000 different languages simultaneously. Its computer systems started filing automatic violation reports against every human ship, charging them with everything from improper formation flying to unauthorized use of creative tactics. "Admiral," reported Dr. Yoon-ji from her monitoring station. "That ship isn't just a weapons platform. It's a floating courthouse. They're trying to defeat us legally. Can they do that? Only if we accept their authority to judge us, which we don't." Captain Hyojin watched the massive alien ship with professional interest. "It's got more firepower than our entire fleet combined. But look at its design. Everything has to be perfectly symmetrical, perfectly ordered. No improvisation, no adaptation." "What are you thinking, Captain?" Admiral Tejo asked over the comm. "I'm thinking that the bigger they are, the harder it is for them to change direction." General Wu Jin had been planning for this moment since the war began. As Earth's most experienced military strategist, he understood that sometimes victory required sacrifice. He looked around the bridge of his command ship, the converted colony vessel New Sol, at the faces of men and women who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. "All hands," he announced. "This is General Wu Jin. Today we face an enemy that thinks they can control the galaxy through paperwork and regulations. They've brought their biggest ship to force us to surrender. I say we show them what happens when you try to put chains on free people." The New Sol was loaded with every piece of obsolete military equipment Earth could spare. Nuclear warheads from the 20th century, chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, and experimental weapons that had never been tested in combat. It was a flying bomb disguised as a warship. "Sir?" asked Colonel Da-Yun. "Are you sure about this?" Wu Jin smiled. "Colonel, my grandfather fought in the Korean War with nothing but determination and an old rifle. My father fought against impossible odds to build a free Korea. Today I fight to keep Earth free. Some things are worth more than survival." Commander No-Ul, Earth's youngest ship captain, was about to become famous for the most ridiculous military victory in history. Her ship, the mining vessel Gwangju's Hope, was facing off against a Valdrian battle cruiser that outmassed her by a factor of 50. "Captain," reported her engineer, Seaman Hanul, "they're demanding we surrender and submit to immediate processing through their prisoner administration department." "Tell them we're too busy," No-Ul replied cheerfully. "I've got an idea." What Noelle did next would be studied in military academies for centuries. She used her ship's mining laser to cut a cargo net loose from a nearby asteroid, then wrapped it around the Valdrian battlecruiser's main gun. When the aliens tried to fire, their weapon exploded inside its own barrel. "How did you know that would work?" Han Yul asked in amazement. "I didn't, but their computers probably weren't programmed to handle having fishing nets wrapped around their guns. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones nobody plans for." The Valdrian ship immediately sent a formal complaint about improper use of mining equipment in a combat environment and requested a ruling from the Galactic Combat Ethics Committee. No Yule responded by using her cargo crane to physically push the alien ship into an asteroid. Meanwhile, the Perfect Compliance was discovering that administrative warfare had limitations. It could file all the violation reports it wanted, but the humans simply ignored them. Every attempt to enforce galactic law was met with cheerful defiance. "Computer," Administrative Director Vex Prime ordered, "implement Emergency Protocol Val Omega 1. All further combat actions must receive approval from the War Conduct Review Board before implementation." "Protocol implemented," the computer responded. "All weapon systems now require committee approval before firing. Estimated processing time for urgent requests: 4 hours, 17 minutes. It was the worst possible moment to implement bureaucratic safety measures. General Wu Jin's suicide attack was already underway, and the Perfect Compliance couldn't fire back without filling out the proper forms first. "Sir," shouted Bleck 7 from his monitoring station, "the human command ship is on a collision course. They're accelerating directly at us. Return fire immediately," Vex Prime ordered. "Cannot comply," the computer responded. "Weapon authorization pending review by Emergency Combat Committee. Please stand by." General Wu Jin's voice crackled across all frequencies as the new soul plowed through the Valdrian formation. "This is General Wu Jin to all forces, human and alien alike. You want to know what Earth thinks of your perfect order? You want to know what we do when faced with impossible odds?" The new soul smashed into the Perfect Compliance like a hammer hitting glass. The explosion could be seen from Earth's surface, a brief new star that outshone the moon for several seconds. When the light faded, the Perfect Compliance was crippled. Its perfect hull cracked open, its administrative computer systems sparking and dying. Half the Valdrian fleet was damaged or destroyed, and the survivors were broadcasting emergency requests for guidance from their home world. Captain Hyo Jin felt tears on his cheeks as he watched the debris field where General Wu Jin had made his final stand. "Sir, the General's last transmission included a message for all Valdrian forces." "Play it," Admiral Taeho ordered quietly. Wu Jin's voice filled the comm channels one last time. Death before paperwork. The effect on the Valdrian fleet was immediate and devastating. Their remaining ships began broadcasting surrender requests, not to Earth, but to their own government. They were asking permission to retreat, permission to call for help, permission to make any decision that might get them away from humans who would rather die than submit to bureaucratic control. Sub-Administrator Cleth Prime stared at the wreckage of the Perfect Compliance and felt something break inside his mind. The ship had been the ultimate expression of Valdrian civilization, perfect order, absolute control, and complete administrative authority. The humans had destroyed it with a suicide attack that violated every principle of civilized warfare. "Sir," Bleck 7 reported, his voice shaking, "our homeworld is demanding a full report on the failure of the Perfect Compliance. They want to know how humans could defeat our most advanced administrative systems." "What do I tell them?" Cleth Prime asked. "Tell them the truth, sir. Humans don't fight wars. They fight for something." Dr. So Young was analyzing the psychological impact of the battle on both sides when she made a disturbing discovery. "Admiral, the Valdrian communications show they're experiencing something their language has no word for." "What's that?" The closest translation would be administrative despair. The realization that there might be situations where proper procedures don't work. For a species that has based their entire civilization on bureaucratic control, That's like discovering that mathematics doesn't add up anymore. Admiral Tae-ho looked at the tactical display, where the surviving Valdrian ships were fleeing in. Disorder. Their perfect formations broken. Their command structure collapsed. So what happens now? Unknown, sir. We've done something to them that has never happened before in their history. We've forced them to face a situation where following rules isn't enough. The psychological effects could last for generations. Captain Hyojin watched the last Valdrian ships disappear into hyperspace and thought about General Wu Jin's sacrifice. The old soldier had understood something that the aliens never could, that some things were worth more than safety, more than order, more than life itself. "Admiral," he reported, "the Valdrian fleet has completely withdrawn from Earth space. All alien ground forces are requesting immediate evacuation. Any final communications from their command?" "Just one, sir. A single message broadcast on all frequencies." "What did it say?" Hyojin smiled grimly. "Species designation human reclassified as administratively impossible. Recommend immediate quarantine status. Further attempts at bureaucratic subjugation. Not recommended." Earth had won its freedom not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the simple refusal to be anything other than human. And sometimes, that was enough. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Sub-Administrator Cleth Prime sat in a detention cell on his own ship, waiting for a trial that might never come. The Valdrian Empire's legal system had no procedures for handling officers who had lost. A war to people who fought with fishing nets and mining equipment. The final phase of the conflict had begun when Admiral Tae-ho received an unexpected message from the Valdrian home world. Not a surrender, not a threat, but something much stranger, a formal challenge to single combat. "They want to settle this with a duel?" Captain Hyojin had asked in disbelief. According to Dr. So Young's translation, it's an ancient Valdrian legal procedure for resolving disputes that can't be handled through normal administrative channels, Tae-ho explained. "Since we broke their bureaucratic system, they're falling back on older laws." The challenge came from Cleth Prime himself, who had apparently suffered a complete mental breakdown after watching humans ignore every rule he believed in. He demanded the right to face Earth's Supreme Commander in personal combat, governed by ancient Valdrian legal procedures. Admiral Tae-ho had accepted immediately, which probably should have worried everyone more than it did. The duel was scheduled to take place on neutral ground, a small asteroid between Earth and the Moon. Both sides agreed to broadcast the fight to their respective populations. For the Valdrians, it was a chance to restore some dignity to their failed invasion. For humans, it was the greatest entertainment event in history. Tae-ho arrived at the asteroid riding a motorcycle. "Sir," Captain Hyojin had asked before the Admiral left Earth, "are you sure about the motorcycle?" The Valdrian legal code specifies that combatants may bring any equipment they consider necessary for honorable combat, Tae-ho had replied with a grin. They didn't specify what constitutes necessary equipment. Cleth Prime was waiting in the center of the asteroid's small dome, wearing ceremonial armor and carrying what looked like a cross between a sword and a filing cabinet. The Valdrian dueling weapon was designed to be both deadly and perfectly organized. It could cut through steel while simultaneously keeping track of regulation compliance. "Human Admiral," Cleth Prime announced formally, "I challenge you to ritual combat under the authority of Valdrian Legal Code 47J, subsection 12, paragraph 4. Do you accept the terms of engagement as outlined in the procedural manual for single combat resolution?" Tae-ho dismounted his motorcycle and drew his weapon, an old Korean ceremonial sword that his grandfather had carried in war. "I accept your challenge, but I didn't read your manual." "You didn't read the manual?" "Nope. Figured I'd improvise." Cleth Prime's eye twitched. Even in single combat, humans refused to follow proper procedures. The fight that followed, would be remembered as the moment the Valdrian Empire finally understood what they were dealing with. Cleth Prime attacked with perfect form, his weapon, moving in precisely calculated arcs designed for maximum efficiency. Teho responded by doing things that shouldn't work, but somehow did. When Cleth Prime advanced according to classical Valdrian sword form 7A, Teho jumped on his motorcycle and drove around him in circles while swinging his sword. When the alien tried to implement Defensive Protocol 12C, Teho threw his helmet at him and attacked while he was distracted. "This is not proper dueling technique," Cleth Prime protested. "Works for me," Teho replied, using his motorcycle to knock the alien flat. The duel ended when Teho did something that violated every principle of honorable combat. He offered to help Cleth Prime up after knocking him down. The act of mercy shown to an enemy who had tried to conquer his world broke the last of the Valdrians' mental resistance. "I don't understand," Cleth Prime said, accepting Teho's hand. "You could kill me. The legal code gives you that right." "The legal code isn't what matters," Teho replied. "You fought with honor, even if your government is run by idiots. That's worth something." Meanwhile, Captain Yo Jin was conducting the final phase of Earth's victory. The remaining Valdrian ships in Earth space were being escorted to the edge of the solar system by human vessels, but instead of a hostile evacuation, it had turned into something resembling a farewell party. Commander Inho had invited the crew of a Valdrian cruiser aboard his ship for dinner, where they discovered that humans cooked food instead of consuming regulation nutrition paste. The aliens were fascinated by the concept of adding spices for pleasure rather than nutritional efficiency. "Your food has no administrative purpose," observed Valdrian officer Zek 9, trying kimchi for the first time. "Yet it provides satisfaction." "That's the point," Inho explained. "Not everything has to have a purpose beyond making people happy." Dr. Yunji made the most important discovery of the war during these final interactions. The Valdrians weren't naturally bureaucratic. They had been conditioned to fear making decisions without proper authorization. Under their rigid exterior, they were just people who had been taught that creativity was dangerous. "Colonel Da-un," she reported, "I think we've been looking at this wrong. The Valdrians aren't our enemies. They're victims of their own system." Dae-Yun had been studying captured Valdrian documents and found evidence supporting that theory. Their home world is run by a computer system that makes all major decisions. Individual Valdrians haven't been allowed to think for themselves in over 3 centuries. So when we forced them to improvise, we broke their conditioning. Some of them are asking to stay on Earth rather than return home. This created a diplomatic crisis that the Valdrian Empire was completely unprepared to handle. They had never encountered a situation where their own people preferred to live with the enemy rather than return to proper administrative oversight. The war officially ended not with a treaty, but with a bureaucratic surrender. The Valdrian Empire declared Earth a no-protocol zone and issued a galaxy-wide warning that the planet was inhabited by administratively impossible life forms who should be avoided by all civilized species. Dr. So Young translated the final Valdrian government statement. The species known as humans has been classified as incompatible with galactic administrative standards. They demonstrate persistent refusal to follow proper procedures, show dangerous creativity in problem-solving, and appear to consider regulations as suggestions rather than requirements. Contact with humans is not recommended for any species that values administrative order. It was the most flattering description of humanity ever written by aliens. 6 months later, Admiral Teho stood in his office looking at the framed copy of the original Valdrian surrender demand, all 47,000 pages of it. Earth had turned the first page into a plaque with a simple inscription. They thought they could make us fill out forms. We made them eat their words instead. Captain Hyo Jin knocked and entered. "Sir, we're receiving communications from 17 different alien species. They all want to establish trade relationships with the administratively impossible humans. What kind of trade? Mostly cultural exchange. They want to learn how to be creative, how to solve problems without following manuals, how to be— Hyo-jin paused, looking for the right word. How to be human? Exactly. Taeho smiled. Set up the meetings, but make sure they understand our terms. Which are: no paperwork required. The Valdrian Empire never attempted to conquer another world. Their encounter with humanity had revealed a fundamental flaw in their system. It only worked against people who accepted the authority of bureaucracy. They spent the next several decades restructuring their government, trying to find a balance between order and freedom. Some historians would later argue that Earth's victory wasn't really about military superiority or tactical brilliance. It was about something much simpler and much more powerful: the refusal to let anyone else define what it meant to be human. The war had started when aliens tried to force humanity into their filing system. It ended when humans proved that some things couldn't be filed, cataloged, or controlled. Freedom, creativity, and the warrior spirit weren't administrative problems to be solved. They were the solution to administrative problems. Cleth Prime, who had been granted asylum on Earth, spent his remaining years studying human culture and writing a book titled The Impossibility of Order: What Happens When Warriors Meet Bureaucrats. His final conclusion was simple. They tried to cage the wind and were surprised when it blew their house down. Earth's reputation spread throughout the galaxy. Humans became known as the species that laughed at impossible odds, the people who treated war like an art form, and the civilization that had defeated a galactic empire with creativity and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. The final message in Earth's official war archives came from General Wu Jin, recorded before his final battle. They came here thinking they could make us surrender our humanity. Instead, we showed them what humanity really means. We are the species that chooses freedom over safety, creativity over order, and laughter over fear. And that, more than any weapon, is what makes us impossible to defeat. The galaxy would remember the lesson. When you try to chain warriors with paperwork, you discover that warriors will always find a way to turn the chains into weapons. And sometimes that's all the freedom anyone needs.